Welcome, everybody, to the Zion Experience. I'm Jim Shaw. I forget Jordan. Jordan Frank, the other co-host, is on.
I'm here.
You know, we really don't prepare for this.
You know, we're better off to come. That's about all you're going to get. Yeah, that's what I got.
I have ham and cheese loaf in the refrigerator for days like today.
With that, let's get back into it.
Let's get in our groove. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the TZE, or the Zion Experience. I'm your host, and I've got my good friend and co-founder and EVP of many things at Zion, mainly execution and advisory, and service and support, Drew Eubank. So Drew's a frequent guest with us, and we're bringing you another episode today. We're going to do what we hope is an industry spotlight on a campaign that we've been doing. We've had several podcasts on this particular topic, and it's medical devices. And what today we really want to focus on is in Drew's past life. Drew was an operator. We've talked about that several times. And so today we're going to just take a viewpoint of medical devices and really look at it through the lens of an operator, of what does it mean to be an operator, what was different about medical devices, maybe what's some technology, some challenges, just general discussion topics around medical devices. So what we hope you get out of this is that you understand how critical it is that to be an operator and what they're responsible for in healthcare supply chains, and what's the challenge of running them every day, or maybe the opportunity to run them every day. And we're gonna talk about how do you balance speed and flexibility along with quality while maintaining customer service, not unlike a lot of other distribution activities and fulfillment activities, but a little more focused on med devices and healthcare in general. And we think you're going to enjoy it. So, Drew, it's been a while since you and I've been on, but welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, nice. I don't mind doing this, but it's kind of nice not to worry about the podcast for a couple of months. But I like this topic a lot because I got in the deep end of the kiddie pool when I first got into healthcare, and one of my main customers was a large med device customer. So it was a baptism by fire, I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I think with that, let's just dive right in. You know, a lot of the time we've spent together over the last decade's been being the solution provider, helping solve problems for customers and operators. But let's flip it a little bit and let's talk about your operator, what you experienced. So what were some of the biggest challenges? If you can go back when you were a distribution leader, what were some of the biggest challenges of managing an operation in medical devices or healthcare in general on a day-to-day basis?
So for those who know me, I've always been an efficiency-based operator, right? Like I've always looked for how do I get better at things from an efficiency perspective. It's just, it's kind of natural to me. When you jump in the deep end of a med device operation, or even any type of healthcare operation, beyond general GMP compliance, is understanding that quality comes first, right? So my very first hand slap from a quality auditor was in a med device operation where I moved some semi-auto tapers from point A to point B to get them closer to the end of line. And I realized I had to have a whole entire approval process for moving those assets over because they were just tapers. And quite frankly, it didn't matter a hill of beans, but it was about the fact I needed that process, any potential negative effects, positive effects, and have quality sign off before I did it. It was kind of an eye-opening experience, right? Because you think, oh, it's just a taper. And I get it was just a semi-auto taper, but at the end of the day, it was about making sure you followed process and protocol so you didn't have anything go out to the customer wrong. And you made sure you got stuff out to the customer every day. The other piece was the 24/7 on-call emergencies that we had to have for our med device product. The one I had, I won't name the customer's name, they were acquired by another large med device organization, but they were in renal care. And there were times at 1 o'clock in the morning when nobody's at site, the bat phone had to ring and we had to pass it around to make sure somebody came in and picked an order and got it overnight direct express to a hospital because somebody had a renal emergency they had to take care of. and just being able to plan for that from an operator's perspective to make sure you have the right calendar, the right call calendar, to make sure you have the right structure, things of that nature. Which is eye-opening. I mean, if you get the wrong size pair of shoes, the wrong size pair of pants you're looking forward to, yeah, it sucks, but it's a pair of pants, right? It's a pair of shoes. You can return them, swap them. It's a little bit of inconvenience. When it comes to med device, when it comes to orthosurgical, when it comes to pharma, life-saving drugs and things of that nature, it could be life and death, right? It's true comfort. It's true life and death scenarios. And so it's just getting to that mindset that it's okay to be effective. It's okay to have inefficiency if it makes sure that you do it right and get it out the door. And you never really had a customer complain about that part of it. And then the software side was just an eye-opening experience as well, right? Because there's usually more requirements that have to be scanned. I mean, a lot of retailers have retail compliance, but that's not the same as serialized units inside of serialized units, and make sure you capture from a warranty perspective and you feed to a host system. Yeah, I picked this master serial, but there were 7 sub serials as part of the package. They went out the door at this time, which kicks off the warranty period back up for this particular device. And then the audits. The audits were continuous. They never stopped. It was once a quarter. They would do pop-ins to make sure things were right. That was everything from GMP all the way up through their product to their protocols, their testing protocols that we had to have in place, especially for the software side of things. So again, it was new to me going into it. It wasn't, I guess when I first started, having done mostly retail, big box type things, e-com type work, the processes aren't inherently different from getting a product out the door. It's just the care's a lot different. And again, making sure that you follow all the protocols.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of hit on that. There's just a much stricter quality and compliance standards. Maybe go into where I'm going to assume we've got some people that, or let's assume some of the people, they don't understand, right? They haven't had that moment. They've always worked in more of e-com. They've worked more on the retail side or something else, a non-rigid compliance and quality standard. Why do those exist? Maybe what are some of the reasons? And then if you can, you've already talked about it a little bit, but what does that mean in terms of a system? What does that mean in terms of the process and the operation? What additional diligence has to be tracked?
So
and
like
why?
if you make any changes to any software, you have IQ, PQ, and OQ, right? It's different testing levels that you have to have done, which inherently makes the process longer. But it's double checks on double checks, right? To make sure things are right. And you have to regression test every potential scenario that can touch that new thing. So give an example, retail environment, we had FIFO turned on. We didn't need FIFO. It created a bunch of extra effort, right? We turned it off. Things got immensely better and everything else. If you were to do that in a healthcare environment, you'd have to regression test inside the sandbox first, show all your proof case test scenarios out, then go through your IQ, PQ, and OQ before you roll it to development, and then log every potential change after. So what may take 3 months in one operation, in a med device operation may take 6, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to make sure you're following the quality protocols of that organization. When you're a 3PL of your internal organization plus your customer's organization, it's just a lot more orchestration. There's a lot more understanding from a timeline perspective, right? I think because of the intrusiveness of everything that you have to do. But when you're talking about med devices, especially in a serialized environment, you'll have the same SKU, 10,000 different serial numbers or combinations that you have to pick. Now all of a sudden my picking footprint's bigger. So now I'm gonna have to map things different from an efficiency perspective. Well, I can't just go change my pick path in a software system. I have to make sure it's validated that it's not going to create an inherently negative effect to the end order. It's just massive. Just understanding the cutoff times are critically important. You cannot miss, right? Now, the good news was customers understood that, and so there wasn't as much pushback on cost. But they're still cost conscious, right? At the end of the day. So again, how do you balance that quality effort? It's just a whole new ballgame. It's the only time in my career where everybody has said yes to a project, including the operators, the inherent operations owner from the customer's perspective, and then quality came in and said no and shut the entire project down. And it was because they couldn't get on board with a piece of it. Now, ultimately, we did the project a year later. Quality auditors, whether it's the FDA, the DEA, or internal to a customer, a lot of times it's up to interpretation, their personal interpretation on how things should be done, right? And that's why you get when you look at a lot of the quality rules and binders and things that come with these big organizations. They almost read like a kindergarten book. They're so blunt, but they do that on purpose. So there's no one, they're trying to get rid of the interpretation factor. But it's just, again, it's a different game to play.
Gotcha.
And some of the parts, the
And
values on
ultimately,
some of those parts, when it comes
the
to
reason
quality.
for that,
Yeah, the value, it's life saving and the value of a part. That piece of equipment I'm shipping out may be worth $500,000 for a small piece of equipment that you are looking at. Go, I wouldn't pay $50 for it. That's $500,000, right? It's a life saving device that somebody has to have. A hospital has to have that replacement immediately to make sure it saves lives. Um, it's just a different level of care. People, fashion's a big deal, right? And people talk about Rolex watches or APs or there's all these different things that people spend money on, but it matters a hill of beans if it comes to life saving, right? So uh, just having that mentality of being planning appropriately, doing the right thing, make sure that you don't have any misses. And when you look at improvement items, you're taking everything into account. You have to look further upstream and downstream to make sure nothing gets messed up. And again, nothing changes until you get that 2:30 call because you're the guy running the site, but you're like, you know what, my team needs a weekend off, and the bat phone rings at 2:30. You're like, well, I guess I'm going to go pay an order. I get out the door in an hour. You zoom down the site, you get it picked, you don't mess it up. The Air Express shows up, you put it on the back of the truck, and you're like, well, I might as well just stay here for the rest of the day now. But somebody's life got saved potentially. I don't know the outcome, but it feels good knowing that you're able to do that type of work that expected out the door.
right? And you don't get, 99.8% isn't good enough. It's got to be 100% in
Nope,
that
100.
regard. You've got to get the
Gotta be
right
100.
product to the right person to the right time at the right place, and it's got to be the right serial number, and
Oh,
it's got to be exact, right? Because
even even things you don't think about. So temperature control inside of any type of medical warehouse is a big deal, right? It can't be too cold or too hot. It's different depending on what you're handling from a device perspective versus pharmaceutical versus device assistant materials like salines and things of that nature, right? When you have a 3/4 million square foot warehouse of 45 foot clear ceilings, and you have one zone that's too hot because your tip tail up in the ceilings off by a factor of a degree, you have to shut everything in that area down, move it to a proper area, and then pay to make sure everything's rezoned. It's a whole new ball game that you don't really think about until you own the operation and realize, holy crap, that's real. That happened. That's something I couldn't plan on happening, and it happened. And now it's something I have to take into account. Again, if you're in a retail warehouse, it's inconvenient and maybe hot for the teammates, or maybe some things happen, but it's not. It doesn't shut your operation down or potentially put something out of a spectrum to where it can't be sold or it can potentially be bad for the person. It has to go on quality hold, right? And that's the other piece too. Quality holds on product were intense. The four wall inventory. When I say follow four wall inventory, I mean the second you put a receipt on an item until it gets loaded on a truck and that truck is dispatched, it's still in your ownership. So until that door pulls away, that truck dispatches, if something happens to that product, I go find it pulled off the truck. And that quality hold can come at any moment systemically. It could come down and say, yep, this SKU range and these serials are impacted. You had to pull it up in the system, stop everything, tell the driver you got to wait, dig out the truck, find that exact product you were trying to pull off, whether their subset was with it, put it on quality hold to the side while you're trying to get a replacement order on at the same time. Again, it's just a different level of intensity that until you've lived it every single day, it's hard to understand. It doesn't mean it's bad, by the way. Most days are good days and most days are smooth. When the exceptions sit, the exceptions usually stood out more so than not.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what about some technology? I mean, we talk a lot of times. We spend a lot of time listening to our customers, figuring out what problems, what pain points they have. But from an operator's viewpoint, do you recall any technologies, or were there operational improvements, or were there software improvements? Were there anything that had a meaningful impact on that quality, that accuracy, the throughput, balancing all the service?
Yeah, when I was running operations, MHE wasn't heavy in the buildings, right? The 3PLs we were with didn't really invest heavily in that. I mean, we had sorters and things, but that was for big box movement of goods. Um, Software was always the biggest enhancements. How we can make machine captures easier. I got to work with one of the first OCR audits in the country at my site. We put up a camera to audit product going out the door. The customer, that's a big deal. To get that second set of eyes on something. So a human being, it's basically capturing what a human being could capture, but more. Jimmy, Joe, Paul, and Sue, they may get tired, they may miss something, but that's going to help catch it. that was a pretty cool advancement because we felt better about making sure no escapes got out of the building, etc. I think in the last few years, the software integration with these new technology partners, especially in the goods to person space, allowing to actually put on hold a bin down to the serial number to be able to pull that out and put it back in while also having that quick retrieval process is a big win, especially if it can fit, right? Because the smaller med device are just as important as the big med device products going out the door. So when I can have that response time cut down because of a technology that can also handle the audit process, it's a big deal. Now, again, it comes with challenges because anytime I change it, I have to regression test back to that technology, right? And that's a big deal as well, potentially, not always, but potentially. So it's just, again, make sure you're minding your P's and Q's. And then when you're sitting in your office one day and 4 Tahoes pull up and out pops the SDA, you got to go have an audit with the FDA. Call your customer, call corporate, make sure things are handled. I think also the advent of having more electronic documentation is awesome. Because if we go back, it's hard to believe, Jimmy, but we're talking about 12, 14 years ago, right? We're not talking about last week. Just the advent of having more technology at hand to help us look through the different changes and change control documentation to make sure things aren't missed and doing that from a software perspective. That's a big deal. That's a big deal today. It saves a lot of time and effort and allows changes to happen quicker in an environment where every change has to be scrutinized. I think that's important as well. So if you think about meta glasses, and I think you have a pair of them, and which you try out every now and again, just what you could do with meta glasses from an OCR perspective and capturing serial numbers on orders and things of that nature. There's just been so many advancements to help guide human beings to not make mistakes, to be that assist that didn't exist 12, 14 years ago. It'd be exciting. It's exciting to see that, we're working with the new technologies to make sure that stuff is right as it gets out the doors. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is. I think there's been a big shift in terms of the additional software capabilities and the additional software augmentation of helping with the quality and helping with what's got to be right. Would you? This will be the last question I'll ask today. So, would you, if you were looking at it, do you have any key considerations if somebody's looking at designing a medical device distribution center or healthcare for distribution center, or if they're looking at updating and enhancing their network, would you have 3 or 4 things that you'd point out to potential customers?
Yeah, you can't go deep enough into the data. You just can't go deep enough into the data. It's not as simple as how much volume per day, how many SKUs, because there's so many subsets of SKUs, so many sub packages and things of that nature. This is going to sound weird to say. It's okay to be slightly inefficient in order to make sure you have 0 quality escapes. And I think that's hard for folks to understand and wrap their minds around because we're such an efficient society. Like, how are we always getting better? But if it takes an extra couple touches to make sure everything's perfect to get out the door, that's well worth the cost of it not going out the door. Right. And that's a different avenue as well. And then very early on in your journey, making sure quality sits on the team to make sure they're bought into everything that you're doing, to make sure that you're aligned along hip to hip. Because there's no worse feeling than having everybody aligned. That one person coming in and saying, nope, I don't agree, and putting all this hard work on pause. There was potentially millions of dollars in savings to an end customer or an OEM, not an end customer, the user, but the OEM. It's just a life lesson that you learn to get prepared for. And I think today's technologies have adapted mostly to that, right? And always have a contingency plan. If something goes wrong and something goes down, you still got to get it out the door. We had freezers with life-saving pharmaceuticals. In fact, we had the last 12 vials of some serum in them that if you got bit by a certain snake across the globe, had to get on a truck within an hour and whatever the life-saving things. I think every vial was worth like $3 million. I had 5 different temperature systems monitoring those cabinets to make sure that there was no variance. And every time one of them had a fart, it would alarm and you had to go check everything, but you had to do it. Expect things like that. Expect to have to do those double checks to make sure. Expect, again, to look up in the ceiling and you see have all these ceiling fans. We're just articulating air to make sure the air temperature spreads evenly from your control systems. Little things, again, that a lot of times are easy to overlook. No propane batteries in society. No, making sure all your pallets are CHEP or PICO or heat treated the right way. And when people talk about heat treated pallets, I don't think they understand that happened because of a medical incident where you had pesticides and got into human consumable product that made people sick in the McNeil incident. And so all of a sudden, the industry got turned upside down. You had Pico and Chep jump in. You had different A grade heat treated pallets pop into it because people got sick because they ingested a product that got poison in it. Well, that's the same across all medical. It touches the human body. It's the same thing, just no different than food. Um, Again, they're very similar. Food, GMP, manufacturing requirements, also, distribution requirements, any type of medical healthcare, they're all very similar. That healthcare just takes it the extra step because, again, it's about the person's care at the end of the day and what you're doing to impact that human life, which is a little more important than bananas going rotten.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good episode, Drew. Thanks for sharing some insight and taking a little trip back in time with us. And we hope the audience has learned a little bit more. We've talked about, and I think you said this during your one of your responses is it's a lot more of a disciplined. It's a lot more of design. It's a lot more detailed effort. But this is not impossible. It's what you do. It's just more attention to the details because the details matter, and it might at first be counterintuitive of you slow down to improve quality, but there's that balance in between it. And so that's what, I think is from an operator standpoint of having that understanding of quality trumps efficiency when it's medical devices, when it's healthcare, when it's some of those other industries that you talked about. And so I think it's fascinating to go back and talk, and thanks for making me feel old that it's been 12 to 14 years. And
you know what? It's the gray and the beard has come full circle. I didn't have a beard back then. That's how long it was. So
I had more hair 12 to 14 years ago. I'm not going to take my hat off and let anybody see it, but here we are. So thanks again, as always, for the time. Audience, thanks for spending some time with us. We hope you all learned some valuable information. We hope you walked away with just a little better understanding of some of the challenges of a healthcare medical device distribution centers, what they face, what's a day in the life of an operator look like, just a little peek into it, how technology, whether it's retail, whether it's medical devices, the technologies are adaptable today, and how the software is adapted to help make people's lives easier, because you're ultimately trying to make a person's life better, especially with medical devices and in healthcare. And we hope you picked up a tip or two. So thanks for spending a little bit of time with us, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
We want to thank you all for listening to another episode of the Zion Experience. Please make sure you subscribe to our show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. If you have any ideas or topics you'd love to hear about, or maybe for a future episode, please let us know. Send us something in the comments. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you here next time.